everybody. Raul here for Bass Musician Magazine, and today we have the great honor and pleasure of chatting with bassist Greg Magnuson. You might know him from Magnuson or Fido. We'll talk about all of that in a little bit, but let's go back to the beginning. Greg, how did you get started in music and on bass?
That's a great question. First off, thanks very much for having me. It's an honor to be here and watched a lot of your videos, so it's really exciting for me. You know, I got started on bass a lot of the same way it sounds like other people did. I was in a musical family. My mom is an opera singer, and we kind of grew up, you know, kind of doing music in church and stuff like that. And I really could not come to terms with playing piano because I can play by ear, and my mom would always want me to read the notes, you know, so there was always a conflict with that. And it wasn't until I played saxophone in band, and that was cool. But what was strange is that before I picked saxophone, I went right over to the string table, you know, like in fourth grade. They had like the table of the stringed instruments. That's where I went first. And I grabbed the violin, you know, and it sounded horrible. But something about that neck of nothing, you know, with the strings on it was just very intriguing to me. So it took a while, and, you know, I kind of want to play guitar maybe. And we had a guitar in the house, but it always seemed like, oh, you can't play that. It's impossible to play a guitar. And so one of my friends actually started playing guitar. And as soon as he could, you know, play a G chord, I thought, well, maybe I can do this too. And he quickly moved to another guitar. I bought his old guitar, and I started trying to figure this thing out. And I got really nowhere. It was just, something didn't click on the guitar for me. And then a friend's band was like, hey, we're doing this thing at this place, and we need a bass player. And here's a bass, and do you want to play? And I was like, sure, all right, let's try it.
Yeah.
And it just kind of worked. For me, the big thing about bass was that I could play in headphones. So I didn't have anybody telling me, hey, that's not the way the music sounds. You know, even a saxophone, you're sitting there playing it, and when you try to first learn a wind instrument, it sounds horrible, me specifically. So yeah, that was what was great about bass. It just really happened fast. You know, I did this one summer thing, and then somebody needed a bass player, and right about the same time I heard Red Hot Chili Peppers and Primus, and I was like, I want to figure out how to do that, and I just did it forever, and then we just kind of started playing. So it kind of took a long path, but once it started, bass was really the thing that I was like, this is what I want.
So primarily, if I'm understanding correctly, you're self-taught?
Yeah, I did a little bit of lessons here and there. From a music theory perspective, some of the things on piano and saxophone translated as far as reading music. I definitely can read music. I'm just not that proficient. I'm not as proficient as I'd like to be on bass, let's be honest. So that's one thing I would say, definitely do that because it is important. But yeah, I never studied at a school really. It was, you know, some occasional lessons from a guy in town. I grew up in Bloomington Normal, Illinois, and just, you know, took local lessons at the guitar place. But that once I got, you know, hey, learn these scales, here's how modes work, here's how chords work, started to kind of get a concept of how things worked. Then a lot of it was just technique, listening to different, you know, albums and different people playing, and then just trying to woodshed to get to the point that I could play that stuff.
Kind of moving fast forward to Magnuson. Magnuson is it interesting. It's a two-piece group. It's your wife, Kirsten, and yourself. And correct. What's kind of fascinating is that between the two of you, there's, if I kind of captured it correctly, there's always somebody on drums. So the other one is filling in a lot of space of kind of everything else. And so you've got vocals, there's bass or a guitar, there's kind of a lot, but you're really filling. So, you know, it's not like you're missing band members. It feels very comprehensive. But tell us a little bit, how did you guys come up with this concept?
The band Fido was my high school college band, and our whole goal was be as awesome as you possibly can. It was kind of a synthesis of Primus and Morrissey, actually. So instrumentally, it's a Primus structure, 3-piece. Vocally, more of like a Morrissey kind of 80s, whatever you want to cut. There's singing. There's not like weird sounds and stuff like Primus does. So that band broke up, and I moved to California in about 98. And I ended up in San Diego, and I didn't play music at all for 2 or 3 years. And then I decided, hey, I started playing bass in like a heavy band. And then I started playing bass in a pop band in LA, so I was splitting the time between both places. And I learned a ton. And what I learned was, hey, you need to really write songs if you want to be successful. It's one thing to play, there's nothing wrong with just playing the bass, so to speak, but to write and to be more of that process is really important from a business sense. And so I had some song ideas, and I did play a little guitar. I had also played some drums because I had a drum kit. My brother played drums, so I would just screw around. And what we realized is that, I started out in some coffee shops and stuff like that, kind of put together the traditional 4-piece band, 2 guitars, bass, playing guitar at that point. And we went through 8 drummers, 8 different drummers. Because in California, everybody is either, I don't want to say this, but I'll say it. You're either really good and you don't show up because you think you're better than anybody you're going to play with, or you're not very good and you will show up. Yeah. So you kind of have to make a distinction of like, these are the people I can get together. Let's see how we do, Yeah. So we did that off and on for about 3 or 4 years, honestly. We put out a record that was in that structure in 2003 called Last Days. Then we kind of started losing band members. So Kirsten was in the band. We had 5 people. Then the guitarist quit. Then the drummer quit. So then I started playing drums as a 4-piece, kind of like Genesis, and then we got down to 3. So I went back to bass, got a drummer, Kirsten's on guitar. Now we're back to the 3-piece setup again. And we did pretty well. We did an EP with that band called The Struggle Within. It's still under the name Magnuson, but a different format. I was excited about it because, again, I was back on my fretless bass, and I was like, yeah, this is great. We booked a tour up to Seattle, actually Portland. We played the Ash Street Saloon.
Okay.
And then we filled in. That was our anchor date. And our drummer just decided that he didn't want to play. He didn't want to do the tour thing. Oh. There was other things that happened. And we've made up since then. But, it's just an example of how people's, ambitions sometimes don't align. And that's what's really hard about keeping a band together. And so, it was like we'd done so many different things. I already had the tour booked. We were ready to go in a month. And I said, you know what? It's okay. We'll move on. So then I told Kirsten, I was like, I guess I'm playing drums. I started on drums, and then we had to tackle the whole instrumentation thing. And we had done this setup a few times because, we lived in LA. He actually lived in San Diego. And to take last-minute gigs and to try to just keep getting yourself out there, sometimes we had to do a show just with a guitar and a drum. Yeah. So we talked a little bit about, hey, should we play to tracks? Should we try something else? I played with a lot of different bands in LA. So one band was like a DJ with a full band, no drummer. Yeah. And that worked okay. But we realized that when you go to see a show, a lot of times people want to see activity. They want to see drums and guitar. Mm-hmm. Nothing against bass, but a lot of times the most common instruments that people click with are drums and guitar. So we basically just made the decision, let's see what we can do with this guitar sound. And we started messing around with the rolling guitar synth. So what I figured out with that is you can turn off strings. So we basically just turned off all the strings except the low E string, and then set that for an octave lower, and run that through a separate bass amp. That was how we toured for a while. Then we upgraded to a new unit, the GR55, I think is what we're using right now. And with that, it's cool because we switch instruments. Right now, the set is about half and half. Half with me on guitar, half with Kirsten on guitar, and then, of course, the opposite on the drums. It's been a very interesting challenge because we're both singing a lot of times. A lot of bands maybe would have a guitar solo or something like that, and instead of that, we'll throw in our vocals. We'll sing a melody line instead of playing it on something. And that allows you to have, you basically got a guitar, a bass, drums, and 2 vocals. So it's very challenging. But yeah, we did 6 tours in Europe, 2 U.S. tours that way. We did some different stuff here, play a ton in LA and around that area. And then so we've played in that structure for about 10 years. And same thing, did another record like that, did an EP like that, and we're working on another one right now. So it's been challenging, but it's just about trying to figure out how to keep playing.
There's so many multiple points among the highlights. The technology that we have nowadays, and the whole guitar synth. Just right before we were talking, we were down in Anaheim at the NAMM show, and we caught their latest Roland guitar synthesizer demo. And there's a lot that it's doing and a lot of possibilities, and you kind of go, well, gee, you could get away with and he didn't even have a drummer. It was just the guitar player. So,
yeah, nice.
So there's a lot that you can do with technology. So, kind of seizing that. And then another kind of reoccurring topic has to do with the human element of personalities more than musicianship. And I've had so many players tell me, like anybody could have played the gig, the bass lines, but I'm a dependable person, or, I show up for the gig. I'm a workable, you can work with me without it being a problem. That has been the secret to their longevity in groups where, again, artistic personalities, sometimes you have them that they just go, and you can't depend on it, which is the unfortunate part. Is that creative thing. Since we're talking about gear a lot, you mentioned you're using a DNA bass amp.
I've got the DNA 800.
Okay.
That we use for the bass signal, and then also since we use some of the two high strings, I set now to like a synth sound, just kind of add a texture, so that both of those things go through the DNA amp. And then we have a couple different guitar amps. Right now we've got a Roland 112 combo that's nice and crunchy. We've got a really nice Mesa Boogie 212 rectifier that is my love, but we don't play that one a lot. I used to play Eden stuff for a long time, so I got a 410 cabinet that I have as well, but started playing the DNA stuff maybe a couple years ago, and I really love it. It's great, and it's nice too because in addition to playing it with the Magnuson stuff, like for the Magnuson project, everything is just how do we get it quickly set up and torn down? How are we mobile? So all the pedals are set to be able to plug in the back line and that kind of thing. And we got like a Black Star distortion pedal and just your standard delay pedal from Boss. And we play on the road, we play traveler guitars.
Okay.
So I've got two traveler guitars that I put synth pickups on. So they look really weird, but we take them through customs and, run around with basically two backpacks. We take our cymbals and a little tiny snare drum. I've got, I think it's maybe a Mapex 13-inch. Okay. It's like an inch and a half by a 13. Literally just whatever works. And then as far as the bass stuff goes, my go-to is my 6-string fretless bass. It's got a carven neck, but I made it. It was kind of like an early college project. And that was just about money. I had a carven 6-string fretted bass. I was really taken with the whole 6-string movement when it first came out. But I really loved that fretless thing. And so I got the 6-string thinking, well, maybe I don't want to go fretless yet. And pretty much within a month, I was like, nah, I want to do the fretless, So Carvin just had good deals. I know they're not really, it's Kiesel now, I think. And I just did an overhaul with it. So I used the Stuart McDonald super glue trick, which was way better than any of the epoxy stuff that everybody talks about, And back here, I got a cello that I made and an upright bass that's kind of like a Sting kind of deal.
Gotcha.
But, so I do woodworking projects too, It's kind of fun.
In the quest for finding the right instrument for oneself, there are musicians that are more hands-on.
Right.
If you're fortunate and the right bass just lands in your hands, then yay. But so often there'll be somebody that says, I like this kind of neck, but I like this body better, and you end up in kind of the Franken bass realm. Where that's how we get, developments. And one of the things we're seeing, especially you mentioned traveling basses, if I had to point out a trend at this last NAMM show, it's the headless bass movement.
Oh, wow.
Everybody's going headless now. And so, Ned was doing the first ones, Steinberger, and now MTD's got headless, Kiesel's headless, Ibanez has got headless. You're starting to see them. There's companies that's kind of exclusively. Bootlegger has some travel headless instruments.
Cool.
Just and the idea is kind of what you're talking about. Is they're compact. The most common place that basses break is headstock, neck junction kind of thing. So if there's not one, then you don't have anything to break off. So that's That's the kind of the concept, but not sacrificing on sound. So wanting to hold on to all of the mass and the sustain and all the things you're looking for in the bass, but making it easy that you won't be fighting with some flight attendant about whether it's going to fit in the overhead compartment or not.
Correct. Yeah, absolutely. That's cool. I mean, I think that's a great thing, you know, and you mentioned Ibanez, but I've always loved those basses. That was the first thing I had. And we have, I think, 3 Ibanez basses. Kirsten also plays bass. So, you know, we got a 5-string and then 2 4-strings here in the house. And I mean, that's just what we like. Yeah, that's cool. It's exciting to see people kind of innovating. And I feel like the bass space is always good for trying things out. One of the most frustrating things when I first moved to LA, and I mentioned this pop band I played with, that I showed up with my 6-string fretless, and he was like, "Do you have any other basses?" And I was, what do you mean? Because it's all about the show. It's about the look of the band. It's not about if you're good or awesome or whatever. So he's like, "Here, play my P bass." Oh. You know, nothing against P basses, but at the same time, it's like they're kind of clunky sometimes, and I just was like, eh. But it again, that's kind of the right project. I didn't get upset. I just said, okay, that's cool, great, you know, and you kind of just go with it. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So it's like the debate: do you play with a pick or fingers? And it's like, to me, I play with my fingers because I like to do a lot of techniques. But I also can appreciate that sometimes you got to just use a pick for the sound.
Yeah.
That's a fact. It's a reality. And I fought for years about that with people. But then at some point, if you want to really play and expand the kind of projects you do, it's just another tool, you know?
Talking more about gear, what other elements? Strings?
For my bass, so again, an argument. Do you put round wounds on a fretless, or do you use flat wounds? And everybody always said, oh, never use flat wounds. They're so terrible. They sound terrible. So I played on my fretless for 20 years or something. And when I really looked at it, it got to the point that I couldn't really play it anymore. So we did this big Fido reunion at Christmas time, and I had to do an overhaul, which is why I did the Super Glue project. And, you know, I really saw how much damage there was. So I thought, you know, I don't want to do this again. This is it's a lot of work. I'm going to have to do this in another 10 years. I'm losing fingerboard. So why don't I try out some flat wounds and see what happens? And these labellas were cheap. They were like $50. The only thing that's weird about them is that they're really light gauge. Like the B string is a 95.
Wow.
So it took a little getting used to. But honestly, I think it's great. Once you adapt to the lighter string, it's a lot easier on your forearms. You know, like carpal tunnel is not going to be as big of a problem. You have to tone down some of your slapping techniques a little bit. But tapping is a little easier because the strings aren't as resistant, and I really like it. I've figured out how to kind of EQ around it. The DNA is great for that, to really dial in exactly what you want to emphasize. That's been really cool for the bass. So if you're a fretless player, don't be afraid of trying out flat wound strings. I just want to say that. Gotcha. For the guitar stuff, we use the Slinkies, heavy bottoms.
Okay.
So I think we use 10s on our Traveler guitars because they're a little shorter scale. And then we play Brian Moore guitars when we're around the house and recording and stuff, and those we use 9s. Ernie balls are 9s, just because we do a lot of detuning. So we tune everywhere from regular E tuning all the way down to B, and I just retuned the E string. So I've come up with ways to play different chords. There's quite a few that are tuned to, so just the E is drop C and everything else is normal.
Okay.
So you get some kind of crazy, you know, that kind of stuff going on, but you gotta loosen it up a little bit, you know.
How about instrument cable? Do you have a particular taste in those?
That's a good question. No, I try to just get something that's got gold connectors. Okay. You know, there was a company that we worked with for a while. I think Monster is usually what I kind of try to use. At this point, it's like I don't want to buy the $8 cheap cable. I want something that I feel like is going to work, you know. So. And we run so many different things that the sound quality can degrade if you're not careful. So, totally. Yeah, so I like Monster cables. I think they're pretty great.
Looking ahead, what plans do you guys have? I know Fido's kind of back, and you're working on that. Magnuson, what's in the works for the future?
Yeah, so with Magnuson, our last tour was in 2017. Really quick story about that. So a lot of the stuff that inspires that band is kind of like Scandinavian metal, progressive metal, that kind of stuff, with a little bit of the pop song format. Since we're in LA, you got to try to, make it marketable. Yeah. So we'll do like a 3.5-minute song that covers the same ground that a lot of prog bands would do in like 15. With that being our focus, we always thought, man, we should go and try to do a tour in Europe. And I was fortunate enough to do a tour with another band from San Diego where I got to play my fretless back in 2001, I think. And we did like 5 weeks primarily in the Czech Republic. So I had some contacts over there. And then in 2011, the name Magnuson is Swedish. So I managed to get on this reality show in Sweden called Altförsverige. And it's basically about Americans trying to learn about their ancestry. Okay. And it's kind of like Amazing Race. There's challenges, but it's kind of a quaint thing and, all that kind of stuff. But from that, we were able to kind of springboard the next year. So starting in 2012, we started doing tours throughout Europe. And we would usually start at this festival, Live at Heart, is a really awesome festival in Örebro, which is like right in the center of Sweden. And then we did, so we kind of just branched out from there and ended up being able to cover Sweden, Finland, Estonia, Latvia, Poland, Czech Republic. We went to Mallorca one year. We did like three years in a row in Iceland and made a lot of good contacts and just really an exposure to some really amazing music that you're just not going to hear other places, So we took a break because we need to get another album together. So we've been writing. We got, this is our studio here, and we like to just do everything in-house. So right now we're jamming, and we've got like really 2 years of different types of materials, different sounds, and places we want to go. But our goal is to at least release an EP this year. And kind of similar with Fido. Fido got together. We've done 2 shows in the last 20-some years, ever since I moved to California. So this year was probably the best, though, and it's kind of like everybody's at a different place in their lives, and they kind of appreciate it again, as if that makes sense. Like when you're in it, you don't think that it'll ever stop, and then when it stops, you're like, man, that sucks. That was a lot of fun. So it was really awesome to see so many people come out at Christmas time, and I used the DNA 110 for that show, and that was awesome. Because it's small, it's mobile, it was so great. And you can really hear it in some of those videos I sent you. But yeah, so we're kind of simultaneously working on 2 EPs for this year. Maybe I've got some tour video and some stuff like that I still need to put together. But, we're always trying to do stuff. And we, Kirsten and I both work full-time jobs. We don't have kids. So our kid is our band, really. We're just always trying to do whatever we can to keep things moving. The Fido thing is looking like doing an EP sometime later this year, maybe September-ish, because we've got music that we've got about 5 or 6 songs that we never recorded. So that's been kind of the quest, is like, hey, let's actually get these down as well. You're just kind of always moving pieces down the board. You know what I mean? Sure. So, and then the tour, we, at some point, you want to make sure that the tour is right. It's fun to just go tour, but the last one was awesome, and we hit a lot of places. We did like 8 countries in like 12 days, and that's just a lot of travel, Too much, probably. But so the next one is going to be a lot more strategic. Actually release a new album and then tour on it and then see how it goes.
Yeah, that seems to be kind of the classic 1-2 punch, is an album release and a supporting tour to go with it. And we see that pattern with huge groups and smaller groups, and it's kind of that classic move that you're anticipating. Now, if people want to know about what's going on for Magnuson, the best place to look is magnusonband.com?
Yes. So that's basically just a landing page. It's our web we've had for years. Okay. We're going to be updating the pictures here. But from there, it links to all of our socials, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. We've got all that stuff, YouTube, Spotify. We've got music videos that people can check out. We've got 5 albums that you can listen to on Spotify. The newest one is called Discordia. Pretty proud of that one. That was in 2016. Nice. I think there's some good instrumental musical stuff going on there that people will maybe want to check out. From there, like I said, you can find us and like us and check all that stuff out. We're pretty active in responding to things. Fido, you can find, it's Phydeaux, and I think it's just Fido Music. So we got a new YouTube channel that I just started for that, and then everything else can be found on Facebook.
Well, Greg, it's been so great finding, learning about your journey, following both Magnuson and Fido, and hearing about how you're getting your sound. Folks, make sure you look either magnusonband.com or Fido, look for them on Facebook. You've seen him here, Greg Magnuson, coming to you live on Bass Musician Magazine.
Awesome. Thanks so much, man. I really appreciate it.